In this hobby, we build a lot of minis, so rarely do we get a chance to build something big. But I had a huge opportunity to build an epic Blood Bowl board. Come check it out. Hi, I'm Nigel and welcome to the Hobby Guild. Blood Bowl came out in 1986, the very first edition. And GW was a new company back then, and their artwork was always super cool. My friend Jesse and I started playing. And it was, standees, not miniatures yet, and it was still cool for us back then. He'd read all the rules and always being me. And I guess I probably should have paid more attention to the rules. I probably would have won more. Jess, you owe me a game. So today I'm going to go over the journey I took this last month on building this Blood Bowl board. I did have a plan to make a video when I started, and as I was building I thought, man, I need to document this. So a lot of the stuff I don't have, but I'd like to show you what I did, and then of course the board at the end. My friend runs a big game shop in Bangkok, and he runs a Blood Bowl league there, so he wanted to build a board, and he sent me a couple pics actually. They weren't the best, but you work with what you got. Looking at this small grainy picture, you could tell that the board was made out of foam and flocking. But foam in a high traffic store like he has would probably not hold up. Planning is key when building a big project. The board itself is 26 inches by 15 inches. And then you have to add everything around the side. You have the end zones, you have the bleachers, and the scoreboard, all that kind of thing. And I also decided I wanted to make the 4 towers into dice towers. Since I had the space, I figured in the dugout area I'll make a place for the dice to catch, and then that way the towers aren't just for looks, they're actually functional. This build was in 2 parts. I have my 3D printing part, and then I have the crafting part of the board itself. I have 2 under 3s, and I've had them for a few years, or 5 years, and I've printed a bunch of the terrain behind me that you see, and I've worked with them a lot, so I thought this would be the best way to go. There's 2 types of 3D printing out there, FDM and resin printing. FDM printing is what I use for this build, and it's a cheaper and stronger material. Resin printing is getting better, but it can be a bit brittle. The plastic comes off the reel through the printer, and it goes through the hot end and it melts onto a moving build plate. And that build plate will shift and follow the coordinates, and then layer by layer it rises up and up and up. And then eventually you'll have your model there. Right away I had fails happening. I had problems with hot ends getting clogged up. I had extruder motors having problems. I had issues I never had before because of old wear and tear on my printers, So I had to replace a motherboard on one. I had to replace the wiring harness on the other, which was really difficult because you had to send the wire all the way through. And I thought I was a mechanic half the time. So I'm glad I had a lot of time to get them done. But the 27 days of printing is almost how long it took. I think altogether I only had 4 days where both printers were running at the same time. So yeah, 3D printing can be a hobby on its own. Heads up. I used the Castle Walls for Printable Scenery, which is a great company out of New Zealand. And they use this open lock system, and they all lock in, and I could customize how I wanted them. A lot of the walls came in this 4-inch segments, which made it very easy to measure out what I needed. The bleachers I chose weren't quite right to scale for what I needed. I wanted the player bases to be able to sit on them, so it looked like you could put the teams in the stands. So when everyone's watching, you can fill up your stadium. So I brought the bleachers into Blender, and I scaled them up a bit to make them fit better. A couple test prints, and then I finally liked a size that would work with what I had laid out. I kept them 4 inches wide so they'd match the length of the walls, easy for all the math. I found this really cool scoreboard tracker on My Mini Factory, and I'll put a link in the description below. The second part of this build was doing the hobby crafting part for the board itself. I got a wood frame made here, and then I inserted foam into the wood frame and glued it with wood glue. Then I did a sculptable base to cover the styrofoam to make it a firm surface on top. After that, I had some wood flock from a previous build. It's actually sawdust. And then you take sawdust and you mix in acrylic paint and water to give you the shade of the flock that you want. Flocking in model terms is like grass cover. So I knew I wanted to have a couple colors of grass for the board because I like the idea in a sports stadium of having the multi-striped colors. So I went in that direction. I picked out the 2 shades of green, and I didn't want them too different from each other because then it would look really funny. If I went super light to super dark, it'd be too obvious. So I went more subtle with it. I don't have a lot of video to show you because I wasn't recording at that time, but it was a lot of dry brushing, you know. So I base coat everything in black, and then I had a dark gray and then a light gray. On the bleachers, there's some wood textures as well. And if you've been in the hobby for a long time, you've painted a lot of wood and stone. One of the plans I decided to do was make tile spacers for the X's to mark the spaces on the board. In the game of Blood Bowl, you count the spaces for movement, so spacing is super important. And I had to do a square every inch. I thought originally I was just going to super glue them on top of the board. They were pretty thick, and I think while playing, the players might have knocked them loose because super glue can crack, and then over time, a lot of pieces would crack. And so I decided I was going to have to cut into the board, and now I did the sculpture mold with the grass and all the glue, so it became a very hard surface. So I had to use an X-Acto knife and get in there and cut everything down. It was very tedious, and there was 400 pieces. It's a lot of spaces. But in the end, when it was done, it looked great. And I liked it more than doing like just all tiles on the board. I liked the feeling of the crafting of the natural board. Having a huge castle that's all gray or shades of gray and then a green board doesn't leave a lot of color. So one of the great things I found was a Facebook group that just did Blood Bowl ads. It was cool. I looked all around, saw all kinds of options using wordplay instead of Coca-Cola or Coca-Cola. And I realized if I had made panels for the signs to hang, they would look good and bring a lot of color to the board. The end zone area was a great way to show off my friend's shop's logo. So I printed out 2 big logos to go on in each end zone. I also found some team posters on a GW Blood Bowl site. It had these cool looking posters for 8 of the teams. So I got those printed out and mounted and put above the dugouts in each end zone. I'm new to YouTube, so please hit like and subscribe and, you know, comment. All that will help this channel grow, I hope. And I'll be reading all the comments. I'm a small channel, so I have the time. This is the biggest, coolest thing I've ever built in the hobby, and I can't wait to show it to you. Let's go check it out. Thanks for coming and checking out my build and checking out my channel. I hope this gets you motivated to get your own hobby time in. Hobby on. Out.